It must be built by Africans. It must be financed by Africans. It must be protected by policies. It must be driven by African institutions. The central question before us is therefore not whether Africa possesses the potential to feed itself. The central question is whether Africa possesses the collective discipline, the unity, and courage required to transform that potential into power. We must restore dignity to farming. We must make rural communities centers of opportunity. We must ensure fair markets for producers and affordable food for consumers. We must treat food policy as an essential pillar of sovereignty. Now, my last point is the most important: call to action. The role of African parliaments in advancing food sovereignty. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, permit me to emphasize that the realization of food sovereignty in Africa will depend not only on the commitment of farmers and policymakers, but also on the determination of our political leaders and legislative institutions. Africa's heads of state and government have already made significant commitments through the Maputo Declaration of 2003 and reaffirmed them under the Kampala Declaration. Under these frameworks, our government pledged to allocate at least 10% of their national budgets to agriculture and rural development as a means of unlocking the continent's vast agricultural potential and accelerating economic transformation. However, the reality on the ground tells a different story. Evidence across the continent suggests that many countries are yet to fulfill this commitment. In some countries, agriculture receives less than 1% of the national budget. Others allocate only 2 or 3%, while some provide as little as 0.6%. Such levels of investment are grossly inadequate for a sector that employs the majority of Africa's workforce, feeds our population, and holds the key to industrialization, poverty reduction, and economic growth. This is where African parliaments must rise to the occasion. Parliaments have a constitutional responsibility to exercise oversight over public expenditure and government policy implementation. They must hold the executive accountable and ensure that the promises made to African citizens are translated into concrete budgetary commitments and measurable outcomes. Parliamentarians must demand answers when agricultural allocations fall below agreed continental targets. They must scrutinize budgets, monitor implementation, and insist that agriculture receives the attention and resources necessary to drive national development. Now, beyond their oversight role, African parliamentarians must become champions of agricultural transformation. They must serve as advocates for policies that support farmers, strengthen value chains, promote agro-industrialization, and expand irrigation, improve access to credit, and enhance agricultural research and innovations. Indeed, politicians themselves should begin to see agriculture not merely as a policy sector, but as an investment opportunity. Public service is temporary, but the need for economic security after political life remains permanent. Agriculture offers enormous opportunities for wealth creation, employment generation, and long-term financial sustainability. Our political leaders should therefore become active investors, ambassadors, and promoters of African agriculture. They should use their influence to attract investment, mobilize resources, forge strategic partnerships, and create an enabling environment for agribusinesses to thrive. Africa possesses the land, Africa possesses water, Africa possesses the labor force, Africa possesses the knowledge and entrepreneurial spirit. What remains is the political will to invest consistently and strategically in the sector that sustains us. If our government honor their commitments, our parliaments effectively discharge their oversight responsibilities, and if our leaders become genuine champions of agricultural development, then agriculture will assume its rightful place as the center of Africa's transformation. On this note, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, he deserves another hand of applause. Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. The next presenter, colleagues, is the Executive Director of CICOT. CICOT is a Center for Indigenous Knowledge and Organization Development. He is a development practitioner and respected in food sovereignty advocacy, leading voice with Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. He is none other than Daniel Faban Banogo. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our next presenter. Thank you. Did I put your name?
Very well, thank you. Good afternoon, and permit me to stand on existing protocols to continue with this conversation. I would want to state that I'm standing here from the Center for Indigenous Knowledge and Organizational Development, but I'm standing on behalf of civil society in Africa. And we come to this space because we feel this is hope for Africa. When we saw the program outline, we felt at least there was still hope and that this conversation couldn't have happened any time than now. And we want to congratulate the organizers for putting this program together. We are reassured that it is not a lost battle and that there are people, there are platforms that are still thinking about the real independence of Africa. Thank you so much for inviting us to this space. I also represent the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, which constitutes civil society across the entire African continent. And so I speak here on behalf of African citizens, African youth, and African civil society as well. I want to do a quick roll call. And if I don't know how many, when I mention a food, I want to see who is connected. Let's start with Ugali. Let's see you proudly. I want to see you. What is Ugali? If you are connected to Ugali, let's see you. Thank you very much. How about Injera? The Ethiopians are not here. How about Inshima? How about Inshima? Let me see the hands proudly. How about Matoke? Matoke, let me see your hands. Okay, then how about Fufu and light soup? So, thank you so much. So, the Honorable Minister has given a very deep, detailed conversation about food sovereignty. And what I want to do in the next couple of minutes is to take us into what it really means for us. Food is just not a commodity. It is a form of our identity. It is part of our culture, it's our heritage, and it defines us as a people. And today I don't know if the people, if you have the IT team have my slides, if they can put them on, or else we can also do without them. Have the slides? Good. As the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa exists to do two things. And we find this space really very appropriate to connect into because it connects really very well with the kind of things that we do. We, first of all, want to resist, we exist to resist the colonization and recolonization of African food systems. And we exist, again, to promote a narrative that will enable us to promote the African food system on the other side. What are we resisting? We are resisting the colonization and taking over of our seed system. We resist the corporate takeover of African food system. We resist feeding our children with food that is not African, that doesn't connect to the African identity. We resist the taking over of African farmlands. Okay? Now, let's move on. Just keep going. Okay. Thank you. So we've done the roll call already. I don't want to whet your appetites. So we are resisting the control of farmer seed systems. We also resist the spread of genetically modified organizations and gene-edited crops because it is eroding the African seed system. We are resisting land and water and other resource grabbing. Today, there is a big conversation about AI, and I see the Honorable Minister here on AI and how it is leading a new form of environmental degradation across Africa, deepening mining and water resource use to be able to cool AI data systems across the world. It's a big issue. We are resisting the control of our food system, and we're also resisting wrong narratives. On the other flip side is that we want to provide solutions as an alliance. And what are the solutions that we are providing? We are promoting farmer-managed seed systems. We promote increasing knowledge and practice for healthy soils and food, promoting the African agroecological system, promoting territorial and local markets, because the malls are only selling that which is not ours. Most of the malls are selling, and every cedi we spend in these malls is an expenditure in somebody's economy to the neglect of the farmer in Africa. Some of the solutions we also provide include integrating agroecology into climate policies, working for African food policy, because as we speak today, if they talk about how do we want to feed Africans as Africa, we don't have a food policy. And therefore, once we don't have food policies, we keep allowing anything and everything into our space. Honorable Minister, if you go into the meat markets today, you will find offals of, are all brought into Africa. If you go out into the streets of Accra and you are looking for food to eat, you are eating the intestines of cows brought in from Europe, the liver of cows, beef brought in from outside of this country. How can we protect and promote the local livestock industry if these things are coming in cheaper, relatively much, much cheaper than what we are able to put on our tables? So these are the kind of narratives we are resisting. But we recognize the sanctity of this space, and we want to approach it with truth, because we realize that today, as we sit here, I think we are being honest to ourselves and looking for solutions. There is a problem with our food system. What are the problems with our food system? The Honorable Minister talked about hunger, talked about the challenges with our production, our seed systems, and all of that. What we just want to point out is that we have wrong narratives all over the world. And when you hear of African agriculture, it is painted as if it is a type of a system that is unable to feed itself. It is backward. It's for smallholders. It is not sophisticated. And this is the narrative that we hear every time. What can we do about that narrative? We hear that there is, and a lot of the interventions about African agriculture are actually determined by people who are outside of Africa. Our financing is determined by corporations outside of Africa. There's a lack of coherence of policies. We have our mining policies conflicting our agriculture policies, trade policies importing a lot more to beat, over prices that are not making our farmers not competitive. And then at the ground level, we are not incorporating our local scientific knowledge into our farming systems. And this creates very serious problems. Now, but if you look through, the minister has talked about the hunger issues. I don't want to deal with that anymore. I want to emphasize on two things. A lot of the conversation we have always held about this whole discussion about food security and food sovereignty seems to always give a lot more of emphasis to the whole food security conversation. Now, what is the key differences between food, and as we talk about family values and sovereignty, we just want to emphasize that at the end of this session, and we really want to stretch that there is a big difference between food sovereignty and food security. Food security measures basically food available to you at a certain time, nutrients at a certain quantity, at a certain price, and stuff like that. On the flip side, food sovereignty actually talks about control of the system. Who owns the system? Who owns the system? So if we have a system that basically allows us to import all the seeds that we have to grow from Europe, import all the fertilizer we need, inputs that we need from Europe, even the funding to support local farmers to be sustainable is all brought in from Europe, then I'm not sure we are dealing with the issue of food sovereignty. We are in the space of food security, that we just want to fill bellies with calories and not be able to control and connect our cultural identity to the food system that we are working with. So on the flip side, food sovereignty actually talks about, it goes deeper into our cultural heritage and connections with food. Our grandmothers pot, they understood nutrients, and food was not split into, carbohydrates and proteins. The conversation around nutritionism did not happen. It was holistic. That looked at the well-being of people. It looked at tradition, connection to our traditions and culture. As we sit in this chamber, Mr. Speaker, we are celebrating one of the most popular festivals in Ghana called Homowo. And Homowo is celebrated around food. It's celebrated around a specific type of maize that is grown by the people, the Ghana state of Accra. And this festival is really at the heart of the history, the heritage, and the connection of the people. The moment we promote policies and production systems that disconnect this group of people from this type of crop, we are not promoting food sovereignty. We are actually on the space of just filling bellies and leaving our culture behind. So I think the minister has spoken quite a lot on the details, and what I'm trying to do basically is just to fill in with the practical realities of what we need to be doing. So I think I want to conclude on this slide. What we must do living here. Good. So just to emphasize this point before I go to the last slide. We've witnessed that recently food has also become a form of weapon. And the person who controls your food controls your behavior, controls where you go, and controls what you do. And the history is there to tell us, even in the recent case of the Middle East crisis, we've seen food that has become a source of weapon. And we've had this history in Africa before. So why we are recommending and urging this House to look deep into this charter and promote the African foods and food sovereignty is, let's guide ourselves against food weaponization in the future. If our whole system is taken over by a corporate industry, and they decide that for one growing season that Africa is not going to get the right seeds to produce, we are going to go hungry. Honorable speakers, the recent Russia-Ukraine war taught us a very big lesson. When we could not have fertilizer coming in from Ukraine and Russia, I remember the minister then asked us to go back and start looking for chicken droppings to grow food. Why can we not improve local fertilizer schemes and local fertilizer production, build farmers' capacity to be able to produce compost and sustainable agricultural practices so that we don't get ourselves into a setup that one day somebody decides that I'm not going to give you fertilizer, and it means that we are not able to feed our countries. We need to look at that quite significantly. We need to look at the fact that when people control our seed system, and a day comes when they have all put all of them into, with the right word is terminator genes, that the second generation of those seeds cannot be propagated. What happens to our family, our seed systems, and the significant role that women play in keeping the seed heritage of Africa? We need to look at that. So we are calling as AFSA for this platform to challenge the current approach to food policy making in Africa. We need to challenge it in this space. We need to articulate a vision of a kind of a food system we need in Africa and how it can be realized. We need to define that for ourselves. Nobody should do it. It has to be owned by us. We need to lay out a coherent and interconnected policy proposals that could be included in the national food and food farming policy, and to provide a framework to organize campaigns, lobby around transforming our food system in Africa, and finally, to continue to build the foundations and pillars of a food movement in Africa, which people from across the food systems collectively engage with and shape. We are available as an alliance to work with you in this process and to support, to mobilize and galvanize our grassroots in Africa to champion an African food system that really reflects the identity, our cultural heritage, and the aspirations of the African society. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the insightful discussion and bringing the practicality of what we're talking about, food, nutrition, and sovereignty. Colleagues, I will open the floor. I will take 2 observations this side. I'll start with the representative from the East African Parliament, and then we'll go to...
Okay, thank you so much. Honorable Speaker, I would like to commend the Minister for Agriculture in Ghana, Dr. Eric, and the representative of AFSA. I think this has been a very wonderful presentation, but I want to go direct to the point. As legislators, I think we have, as a continent, we've come up with different frameworks at national, regional, and national level. And most of these commitments are done by ministers at the international level, but domesticating most of these commitments becomes almost a dream. I think I need to start from there. Honorable Minister, how do we ensure that the CADAP declaration, because the CADAP declaration, the recent, because we had the previous, the Malabo, 15% to agriculture, only 3 countries tried to allocate that money to agriculture, and yet our comparative advantage as a continent is actually in agriculture. If there is anything I will not forget about Ghana, is the food. When I come to Ghana, the jollof rice, the fufu, the banku, that is the best food ever. Maybe the Ghanaians themselves may not be in the know, but I know that. So I think that it's important as legislators to look at how do we allocate our own resources to make sure that the investment that we put in agriculture helps us, including in addressing the youth divide across Africa. Because as far as we are talking today, the young people are not much attracted to agriculture. They feel it's a dirty job, and yet that is where actually wealth is. So I would like us to move from talk, international commitments, to domesticating these commitments and working together with parliaments. That's one. Lastly, I am an environmentalist, and I'm an environmentalist, and I'm a climate change lawyer. I would like us to not to disassociate from issues that are affecting food sovereignty and food security in the world. That is climate change, that is wrecking the world. So most of the texts that come from the UNFCCC, the climate change conferences, are driven by other players who are actually the global emitters, the USA, the Chinas of this world, and the EU. Africa emits just less than 4%, but we get the highest amount of floods, droughts, and all that. So I think as we go for these negotiations, Africa must come clear on an affirmative action for Africa in addressing climate change and hence hyping food security and food sovereignty for Africa. Otherwise, 10 years will come and we would have not achieved our 45% target as per the CAP declaration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll take the
next
much. Comment.
Yes, from Nigeria.
You have the floor from Nigeria.
Yes, I would like to invite you to Nigeria. We also have very good jollof rice there. Yes. So thank you very much. Food is a very important conversation. I don't think we can exhaust the conversation of food today, because I don't know if there's anybody here that has not eaten for the past 48 hours. Food is an existential requirement to life. And he who controls your food will control your life. And if Africa loses her food sovereignty, it's over. And I would like to say here that many of our parliaments, and this might help you, your question, many of our parliaments have been captured by consultants that are helping us push their agenda, funded by the people that bring this agenda. That's why you have many of their SDG goals and everything more popular than our Maputo Declaration. We are driving their agenda in our parliaments, not driving our own agenda. I have had this conversation at the African Union several times. I keep asking them at the African Union, why are your policies not passing Addis Ababa? Because the member states are like brides that are already being courted by policies from United Nations, the New York headquarters, pushing their agenda aggressively. They have distilled their policies to implementation structures that are at grassroots level. Meanwhile, we keep discussing the same things at Addis Ababa, year in, year out, no action. And that's why I'm saying today, I am particularly going to speak on the area of GMOs as regards food sovereignty. Let me say something to that. Look, permit me to stand, please. We need to study this very carefully. If on this side of this hall, we plant GMO maize, right? And on this side, we have organic maize. The GMO maize will cross-pollinate with your organic maize and wipe it out, because the GMOs actually are programmed to reproduce just once, to create dependency on the person from abroad that is selling the seed to us in Africa. So, as existential as food is, imagine if you always have to buy the GMO seeds from the companies that are wiping off your natural seed, because in a short while you will not find your natural again. In Mexico, they banned GMOs because of this very thing. They started looking for their natural crops. And these GMOs will not survive without agrochemicals. These GMO seeds have been programmed to withstand agrochemicals.
Thank you.
So I'm saying this to this effect.
I'll
that
give
we
1
need
minute,
to look at this carefully.
1 minute to our moderators to conclude.
Thank you so much for, I see most of them as comments and contributions. But I want to start with even the first one that talks about the CADEP. And the way the contributions on the protocol of 10% to our agriculture of our budget. It will surprise you, Honourable Minister, we did an analysis of Ghana's agriculture expenditure, not recently. But when we did the analysis in the last 5-6 years, we even found out that even the little that we are putting into the agriculture sector is still going into the area of seed imports, it's going into the area of fertilizer imports, and therefore, and you've seen that even with the growing expenditure in the agriculture sector, productivity is still going down. So what is the problem? We need to build resilience. And in building resilience, we really need to put a stop to the importation of genetically modified seeds with the accompanying fertilizers and pesticides that support a monocropping system that is depleting the African food diversity. We need to make a decision to stop that. It's very critical.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, let me indicate that I'm so much excited this afternoon because the competition between Nigeria Jollof and Ghana Jollof has been settled this afternoon. The verdict was given by Our Lady, the Honorable Member, when she concluded that Ghana's Jollof is the best. So that settles the competition. Now, on a more serious note, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, every producer, regardless of where you find yourself, you produce in anticipation of demand. We have the responsibility to let our people understand that every expenditure incurred on imported commodity amount to exportation of jobs at the peril of our youth. As political leaders, every day our people are on us. We want jobs, we want jobs, we want jobs. If we are able to patronize made in African goods, African business will have the opportunity to expand and create job opportunities for our own people. So we must all consider ourselves as ambassadors and then get our people educated on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Another big hand of applause to our presenters, Honour Minister, and our expert. We thank you very much. As the saying says, that you teach every child needs to know the price of a bread whilst his parents are still alive. And Chinua Achebe said, and I quote, if you don't like somebody's story, please write your own. Time has come for us to write our own story. Thank you, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for participating.
Thank you very, very much, First Deputy Speaker. We are grateful, and our distinguished panelists, the Honorable Minister and our brother. After we looked at our educational sovereignty, health sovereignty, agricultural sovereignty, we realized that Africa, our sovereignty is in question. We want to move straight to the next topic, and that has to do with our resource sovereignty. You know, we have a lot of resources in Africa. How do we protect it? To do this for us, we have the delegation, the head of delegation from Burkina Faso. He is the Honorable Dafidi David Lombo, First Deputy Speaker of People's Legislative Assembly of Burkina Faso. Honorable, you are welcome to moderate this session. In fact, we have 3 resource persons, but because we have changed our time, they have to take leave of us. So we have only 1 resource person who will do justice to this topic. And so we'll be giving him only 10 minutes to do the presentation to cover extractives as well as the other sectors. To help, yes, Honorable, you are welcome. Please, Bon arrivé. Let's give it to him. Let's clap for him. Honorable Dafidi David Lombo, First Deputy Speaker of People's Legislative Assembly. To support him, we have the presenter who will be doing 3-in-1. It's our own brother, Dr. Maoli Kofi. Shall we invite Dr. Maoli Kofi to take the podium? Since you are the only person who will be doing the presentation, I'm giving you 10 minutes. Right, Honorable Speaker, the floor is yours.
Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Je vous souhaite la bienvenue au panel 3 consacré à une question stratégique pour l'avenir de notre continent, la souveraineté sur les questions naturelles en Afrique. Alors, malgré l'abondance de sécheresses minières, énergétiques et stratégiques, l'Afrique continue de faire face aux défis de la maîtrise effective de leur exploitation, de leur transformation et de leur répartition équitable de la valeur qu'elles génèrent. Aujourd'hui, la réflexion ne porte plus seulement sur la propriété juridique des ressources, mais également sur le contrôle des chaînes de valeur, la gouvernance des secteurs extractifs et la capacité de nos à retenir davantage de ressources au bénéfice de leur population. Ce panel est finalement réduit à un seul intervenant, nous offre l'occasion d'examiner les voies et moyens permettant à l'Afrique de renforcer sa souveraineté économique, de promouvoir une exploitation responsable de ses ressources et de faire de celle-ci un véritable levier de développement durable, de prospérité partagée et d'affirmation de notre indépendance. Pour éclairer cette réflexion, nous avons l'honneur d'accueillir initialement 3 experts qui se réduisent à 1 que je m'en vais vous présenter. Il ne nous reste que Dr. Maoli Kofi. Croyez que votre Dr. Maoli Kofi est un universitaire et un expert ghanéen reconnu dans les domaines de l'économie, de la finance et du développement. Il possède d'une solide expérience en gouvernance économique, en gestion stratégique et en politique publique. Ces travaux portent notamment sur la transformation économique, la création de valeurs locales et de développement durable en Afrique. Il intervient régulièrement dans des débats relatifs à la souveraineté économique et au développement du secteur privé. Alors, je crois que le fait que les autres soient absents nous donnera un peu plus de temps pour qu'il parle un peu plus. Mais avant de lui donner la parole, je voudrais donc faire une précision, parce que le traducteur, je ne sais pas si c'est ce que le modérateur a dit. Je suis Dafidi David Lompo, premier vice-président de l'Assemblée législative du peuple du Burkina Faso et non du Congo. Merci. Donc, docteur, vous avez la parole.
A very good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, speakers of parliament and members of parliament. I'm supposed to be here with two other colleagues who are more vexed in this topic than myself. But I take the opportunity to share my thoughts with you on rethinking ownership, control and value retention in the extractive sector and particularly in the cocoa sector. We use cocoa here as a reference for all the cash crops that are central to the economies of African countries. Each country here represented has one particular crop that drives the economy. So my reflections will be about all these sectors plus the extractives. When we speak about resource sovereignty in Africa, we are fundamentally asking a simple but important question. How can African countries derive greater value, prosperity, and long-term development from the resources they possess and produce? This question is particularly relevant for the extractives and for the cocoa sector and all other cash crop sectors in our various countries. And while these sectors differ in many respects, they share a common challenge. Africa produces a significant share of the world's raw materials, yet captures only a small fraction of the total value created across global supply chains. In cocoa, West Africa, as the Honorable Minister of Agriculture stated, nearly 70% of the crop comes from West Africa. Yet the overwhelming share of the value is generated downstream through processing, manufacturing, branding, retailing, and the rest, and indeed logistics. So similar pattern exists across all the extractives, where countries export raw materials but capture limited economic value that benefits the people from where it is extracted. So the challenge before us is not simply production, it is how to transform production into prosperity. So let me try to share some understanding of resource sovereignty. Resource sovereignty is not about isolationism or restricting trade. It is about ensuring that producing countries have the capacity, institutions, and policy space to derive fair and sustainable value from their resources. In practical terms, resource sovereignty means greater participation in the value chains, value addition, and value creation. It means stronger domestic industries. It means increased employment creation. It means more equitable distribution of value. It means sustainable management of natural resources, stronger national ownership of development outcomes. These objectives are not just about capturing value domestically, but to capture a fair share of it while remaining integrated within the global markets. Permit me, because I work mostly in cocoa, to talk about what happens as a strategic case in the cocoa sector. The cocoa sector represents one of these clearest examples of this challenge. For decades, producing countries have supplied the raw material upon which a multi-billion-dollar global chocolate industry has been built. Yet, many producing communities continue to face lower farmer incomes, limited local processing, weak rural infrastructure, productivity constraints, vulnerability to climate and market shocks. So this raises fundamental question. Can a sector be considered sustainable if the farmers and the original contributors to this produce in its fresh thinking means that resource sovereignty must be driven by rethinking how this equation actually works in practice. That calls for us to reflect on what are the mechanisms for value creation and retention. At the center of this discussion on ownership and value creation must be today, one of the greatest risks facing cocoa sector is not demand. It is whether farmers will remain in the sector. Farming does not provide a pathway to prosperity. Younger generations will leave agriculture. Investment will decline, and supply security will eventually be threatened. Farmer well-being is therefore not merely a social objective, it is a fundamental strategic imperative. And as I said, I'm using cocoa as a case study. It applies to all the cash crop commodities that is peculiar to each of the countries represented here. So beyond raw material exports, producing countries increasingly are seeking to move from just producing raw materials to doing something different by expanding domestic processing capacity, by supporting local manufacturing, building indigenous businesses, particularly in the agricultural space, developing regional value chains, and increasing participation in the higher value of these markets. Recent policy directions in Ghana, for example, point to a growing determination to retain more of the value domestically through processing and industrial development. This should not be seen as a challenge to global trade. Rather, it is a natural evolution towards more balance and inclusive, effective governance, transparent institutions, predictable regulatory frameworks, accountability, efficient agencies, and sound financial management. Countries that successfully transform natural resource wealth into long-term development are often those with the strongest institutions rather than the largest resource endowments. Sustainability will require that the less producing and consuming countries, strong partnership between governments and industry, long-term investment in resilient landscapes, fair distribution of both value and risk. And this is where the conversation sometimes moves away from reality. Who bears the risk, but who takes the value? So resource sovereignty should strengthen participation in global markets, not weaken it. So why should industry recognize these factors? For industry actors, the conversation around resource sovereignty is not a threat, it is a signal. Producing countries are increasingly seeking greater value retention, stronger local industries, higher levels of investment, better outcomes for farmers, more equitable partnerships, and companies are beginning to align with these aspirations, and they are likely to become strong, long-term partners that can secure resilient supply chains. I want to conclude these remarks as we go into the conversation by saying that the future of Africa's resource sectors, whether cocoa, minerals, oil, gas, will be shaped by our ability to move from extraction to transformation, from production to prosperity, and from dependence to partnership. For the cocoa sector, resource sovereignty ultimately means that farmers, communities, and producing countries capture a fairer share of the value they help create. Because the true measure of success is not how much Africa exports, but how much prosperity it creates through its resources. And in a changing world, resilient supply chains will increasingly depend on resilient producers, stronger institutions, and more equitable value distribution across the global economy. Mr. Chair, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I want to rest my reflections here and allow the space for us to dive deeper in the conversation about how do we create an environment that allows us to have control, value, and prosperity out of our resources. I thank you.
Ok, merci Dr Kofi Maouli. Et félicitations pour cette brillante intervention qui nous ouvre l'esprit par rapport à l'ensemble de nos ressources naturelles qui sont pas exploitées par nous-mêmes et qui constituent donc un manque à gagner pour notre économie. Alors maintenant, comment créer la résilience pour que désormais nos ressources puissent être exploitées, produites, consommées par nous, pour nous et avec nous. Donc, l'occasion est donnée à l'ensemble de vous tous d'apporter vos réflexions autour de la question ou de poser des questions à Dr Maoli qui a une forte expérience dans le domaine du cacao. Vous avez la parole. On va faire une seule liste d'interventions. Et inscrivez-vous s'il vous plaît. Donnez votre nom. Donnez votre nom s'il vous plaît.
My name is Butao. I'm from Zimbabwe. So what I wanted to do, Dr. Kofi, was to raise a couple of points because you used the cocoa as your illustration for resource sovereignty within Africa. So I wanted to put this question across to you, Dr. Kofi, whether you have at some time applied your mind to the role that was played by GATT in 1948 when it was formed, because none of the African countries were liberated by that time. So I want you to know that Africans were not present when GATT was launched in 1948. Africa was also not present at the Washington Consensus in 1974, which was the transformation of the gold-based currency into fiat. So these things may look like they are not related to our challenges with resource sovereignty, but I just want you, Doc, to kind of think about them. Finally, I also want you to think about the relationship between the fiat currencies, the SWIFT payment platform, and the petrodollar structure, which may be, to some extent, be currently influencing the geopolitics of the Middle East. Thank you, Dr. Kofi.
Merci bien. Oui, allez-y.
Mais uma vez, eu quero tocar um aspecto que o orador não tocou, mas é a questão do setor extrativo. Por exemplo, nós em Moçambique acabamos fazendo uma revisão da lei para que os recursos minerais não saiam do país sem serem processados. Mas aqui há um desafio que nós, como africanos, temos que levar em conta por causa do investimento nessas áreas. O que acontece? A maior parte dos investimentos na área extrativa é externo. E quando eles vêm, pegam os nossos recursos, 80% é para eles, saem fora da África ou do país, e 20% é que ficam. Aqui é onde nós temos o maior desafio de nós compreendermos que é preciso que também começamos a criar um setor empresarial muito forte em África e fazermos investimentos para inverter esta situação. Porque prevalecendo o atual cenário de investimentos estrangeiros, dificilmente a África tirará maiores proveitos na área de extração mineira. Esta é a reflexão que eu quero trazer. Muito obrigado.
Merci. Ok, on prend deux là et ensuite on passe par là. Oui?
Bonjour à toute la salle. Merci pour la parole accordée. Moi, c'est Alain Choroma Adoum, je suis tchadien parlementaire. Depuis ce matin, Dieu merci, nous avons beaucoup appris à travers les interventions. Cependant, j'avais entendu beaucoup parler de l'agriculture, de la résilience, de la sécurité alimentaire. Or, pour moi, on devrait aussi intégrer l'élevage. Pourquoi je dis ça? Parce que l'agriculture et l'élevage, ils vont de pair. On ne peut pas parler de l'agriculture sans parler de l'élevage. On ne peut pas aussi parler de l'élevage sans parler de l'agriculture. Et nous tous, je crois, en tant qu'Africains ici présents, nous appartenons soit à des fils d'éleveurs ou soit à des fils d'agriculteurs, quels que soient nos backgrounds. C'est pourquoi j'aimerais qu'on intègre aussi l'élevage. Quand on parle de l'élevage, parce que ça fait partie des ressources africaines. Je prends un exemple palpant. Au Tchad, chez moi, nous avons plus de 100 millions de têtes de bétail confondues. Et là, ça fait une richesse inestimable. Au niveau du Tchad, nous exportons la viande. Et c'est pourquoi j'ai dit l'élevage est très important, il faudrait qu'on arrive à l'intégrer. Parce que depuis ce matin, j'entends seulement parler de l'agriculture, je voudrais aussi parler de l'agriculture, comme vous avez dit, par rapport à la sécurité alimentaire et la résilience. Chez nous, l'agriculture, c'est à deux niveaux. Il y a l'agriculture extensive et il y a l'agriculture intensive. Nos parents, parfois, sont démunis. Nous utilisons les outils rudimentaires, les outils aratoires, je voudrais dire, pour faire de l'agriculture. Et là, ce n'est pas à une échelle importante. Et pour parler de la sécurité alimentaire, il faut d'abord et avant tout parler des outils. Et quand je parle des outils, je parle des tracteurs pour faire de la vraie agriculture afin que l'Afrique puisse sortir de l'insécurité alimentaire. Voilà, c'est ce que je voudrais dire. Pour conclure, je voudrais dire ceci. Économiquement parlant, culturellement, socialement, nous, on a des difficultés au niveau de l'Afrique parce que tout ça, parce que l'agriculture ne répond pas comme il se les doit, l'élevage ne répond pas comme il se les doit, et donc, même si on parle de la résilience, pour le moment, on ne peut pas parler de la résilience à 100%, mais je dirais peut-être à 40%, et petit à petit, nous allons continuer par progresser. Et donc, pour le moment, le fait de dire nous sommes résilients, nous sommes interdépendants, je trouve que le mot est un peu gros, mais petit à petit, nous sommes confiants, l'Afrique est confiante, et petit à petit, nous allons progresser pour arriver à l'interdépendance technique, culturelle, économique et sociale. Je vous remercie.
Merci. Alors, l'intervenant demande à répondre à cela. Après, on prend les suivants. Merci de patienter. Donc, nous lui donnons la parole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and distinguished members of Parliament. I think there's a comment from Zimbabwe, from Mozambique, and one from Chad. I've been to many African countries except Chad, so Zim and Mozambique, I've had the privilege of living and working there. So you talk about GATT, which was promulgated sometime in 1948. The world has long since gone past GATT. We are in a WTO regime, and most of the trading principles have changed since the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs were set way back in 1948, before I was born. The Washington Consensus was also largely influenced by that. But what you see in the WTO is a different framework that allows a level playing field. Whether we all live by the rules or not, that's a different conversation. But the rules of trade were defined within the auspices of the United Nations in the World Trade Organization. But that also is another conversation, whether the trade framework works for us. You mentioned about the petrodollar structure, which is a large conversation about things that may not necessarily inform how we think about resource sovereignty. But permit me to say that the way we see trade must not be isolationism or protectionism, but how do we actively participate in trade in such a way that it brings us value? In a sense, looking for our interest in trade. How much of the conversation at the World Trade Organization is influenced by the conversation and expectations of African countries. The MP from Mozambique talked about something that is very fundamental to resource sovereignty. He talked about the fact that external investment is massive in Mozambique, and that drives the exportation of value. Indeed, for most of the African countries, they do not have the balance sheet required to attract huge investment that are needed for some of these natural resources. And some of these are capital intensive, and local banks are too small and they don't have the balance sheet to actually raise the required capital. Perhaps one of the ways that we should consider this problem and how to deal with it is whether we can create financing models in our various countries where we can generate enough capital to take advantage of mineral resources that are within our country without bringing external resources. As somebody said in this podium earlier on, he who calls the piper calls the tune. If I bring my investment, there are two things involved. I come with the risk that I carry, and to compensate for the risk I take, the chances are that the value will gravitate towards who is taking the risk. So one of the things that we should be thinking about is, what is our financing model for natural resources? Does it still depend on external resources to be able to finance some of these things? Not too long ago, Ghana depended largely on external financing for purchasing cocoa, which obviously put us in a case where we are unable to actually determine what we want to do with our crop. Before the crop is even harvested, we owe people who give us money to buy the crop from farmers. How do we change some of this? My view is that the various countries should begin to look at natural resource funds where they deliberately, intentionally decide that this will go into natural resource exploitation, natural resource value addition or transformation, and natural resource trade. That way, we can extricate ourselves a little bit from the shackles of financial constraints that limit us to what we can do, even when we have the product. The MP from Chad was very passionate about livestock, and I do agree with you. Livestock is very, very critical for, livestock is a resource. If you have 100 million livestock in a country like Chad, Tanzania has a huge amount of cattle. That in itself is a resource. Unfortunately, most of us depend on imported beef and meat from elsewhere. And perhaps this is where the conversation needs to go about how do we improve intra-African trade so that we are buying meat from Chad, we are not buying it from elsewhere. And some of these meat we buy, they are frozen for many, many, many years. They are not even fresh enough, but we still buy them. How do we ensure that meat from Chad gets to Accra fresh and priced reasonably well? How do we ensure that? I've never been to Chad because going to Chad is a circuitous route. How do we change all of that? And so some of the things that we should be thinking about is, if we want to have complete control, capture the value, create and capture the value, we should be thinking about how does Africa behave when it comes to the area of trade. And that is one area that I think we should pay attention. And then the final comment he made that is also very critical is technology, mechanization, and modernization, and scale. Technology, mechanization, modernization, and scale. Most African producing units are very small and do not have the opportunity for economies of scale. Even if you increase the gain to a small scale farmer that is producing maybe 1.5 hectares of cocoa, there is so much you can achieve with that because of the scale. Deploying technology becomes a challenge, and modernizing it to get to the level where it becomes very efficient is also difficult. That is why in resource sovereignty, one of the things we should be looking at is how do we utilize our production systems and structures and what are the types of technology and modernization models we can introduce to increase efficiency and by that increase how much value we create and capture. Those would be my responses. There are so many brains around here, so if you have contribution, please feel free to join the conversation.
Merci, merci. Alors nous allons poursuivre juste pour prendre quelques questions à ma gauche. Si vous le consentez bien.
Merci, merci Honorable Davido. Thank you very much, Honorable.
S'il vous plaît.
Yes, we are done.
Oui,
you want more questions?
Oui, on avait promis.
You don't want to go for lunch, eh?
Si, ça fait attendre.
So should I give you 2 minutes? 2 minutes. One. Oof. Okay, moderator. 2 minutes.
Merci. Oui, allez-y.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, modérateur de la séance. Je suis le député Aboubakar Kabré, membre de l'Assemblée législative du peuple du Burkina Faso. Je suis environnementaliste et économiste planificateur. Je voudrais intervenir ici sur la question de la souveraineté des ressources en Afrique, notamment la question de la rétention de valeur dans l'industrie extractive et exposer le modèle du Burkina Faso. Partager notre exemple. Alors, au Burkina Faso, pour résorber cette problématique, nous avons procédé par l'adoption d'une loi sur le code minier qui a permis au pays de cadrer l'exploitation minière. Alors, cette loi a permis, après son vote, son adoption, à ce que, par exemple, toutes les sociétés minières qui s'installent au Burkina Faso accordent d'office 15% de leur propriété à l'État du Burkina Faso. C'est-à-dire que l'État a d'office 15% de participation dans toutes les sociétés industrielles qui s'installent au Burkina Faso. À travers toujours cette loi, l'État s'arroge... Merci. 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 À travers cette loi, l'État s'arroge la possibilité d'augmenter sa part à 45%. L'État ou les personnes privées burkinabées. Donc, au Burkina Faso, toute société industrielle qui s'installe a l'obligation de laisser une marge de 45%, soit 15% à titre gratuit pour l'État et les 30% à titre onéreux qui peuvent être acquises par les privés ou bien l'État. En plus de cela, il y a la possibilité de récupérer les dividendes des sociétés minières en nature, c'est-à-dire à travers de l'or et non à travers des numéraires. Cela a permis à notre État de mettre en place une réserve d'or. Sur l'année 2024, on a pu acquérir 13 tonnes d'or qui constituent aujourd'hui la réserve burkinabé en termes d'or. En plus de cela, on peut ajouter la suppression des avantages fiscaux et douaniers accordés aux sociétés minières durant la phase d'exploitation. Il faut dire qu'avant 2024, quand une société arrivait au Burkina, pendant la phase de recherche, d'exploration, de préparation et d'exploitation, elle bénéficiait sur toute la chaîne d'exonération fiscale. Avec le capitaine Ibrahim Traoré, on a dit non. Quand la société commence à exploiter et donc à créer de la richesse, à partir de ce moment-là, les exonérations sont arrêtées. Et la société doit payer les impôts comme tout le monde. Donc ça permet d'augmenter. Et enfin, le passage de la durée de validité des permis d'exploitation de 20 ans à 10 ans. Vous savez que quand les sociétés minières arrivent dans nos pays, ils négocient des conventions minières qui les accordent des avantages sur une longue période, de telle sorte que tout ce qui est lié à la fiscalité, par exemple, est figé. Avec le capitaine Ibrahim, on s'est dit que c'est trop, 20 ans, c'est trop long. Donc cette durée a été ramenée à 10 ans pour permettre d'adapter les réalités de nos pays à la production d'or effective. Donc toutes ces mesures-là, mises l'une à côté de l'autre, a permis aujourd'hui à notre État, le Burkina Faso, de tirer le maximum de l'exploitation minière au profit de nos populations burkinabées. Et peut-être enfin, pour finir, un dernier mot, l'État a pris l'initiative de construire sur place au Burkina Faso une société de raffinage d'or, de telle sorte que l'or qui est produit au Burkina est raffiné sur place. Et tout ça, ça permet de contrôler le circuit de la recherche jusqu'à la production. Donc voilà un peu un certain nombre d'éléments qui sont faits au Burkina Faso que nous avons voulu partager avec l'Assemblée. Je vous remercie.
Merci pour votre contribution. Oui, allez-y.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Much of what I wanted to say slightly has been spoken by Burkina Faso, but my name is Deo from Tanzania, and Tanzania is very well known on mineral resources sovereignty as the first country that actually took a major decision. And I think Burkina Faso copied from Tanzania what actually we did. So all what you said is something we've done, but I just wanted to add something. I tend to think that when it comes to natural resources sovereignty, we Africans need to be smarter. Most of the time, we are devil of our own doing. One guy has mentioned about issue of capital, that we need capital from outside. And I think that's why we need to be very, very smart. We need to do domestic mobilization, as he just said. However, I just want to add one other thing. The tendency in this sector is to compete for capital from outside, which tends to really destroy our bargaining, our leverage to bargain. And my suggestion to this meeting is that we have to go by experience in the last 5 years. In a number of countries, Tanzania, Burkina, and few others, have just put down the rules, which will, the bottom line is a do or go away. Yeah. It's either you do it or you go away. Now, the issue is we tend to compromise each other because other countries tend to go and undercut and put much softer conditions. And these investors, they are also smart, they go to those countries. So my issue is we need very clear, coherent policies across the continent. We will never have a uniform legislation, but at least we should have some minimum conditions which these guys, when they come, these are the terms and conditions under which they can operate in Africa. Without it, if we continue to undercut ourselves, we will never get out of this slavery.
Merci. Merci bien. Alors, OK. Donc, merci à tous les intervenants. Donc, avant de donner la parole au docteur, je voudrais juste dire que, au-delà de tout ce que nous savons, au-delà de tout ce que nous avons entendu, au-delà de tout ce que nous disons, nous devrons comprendre, quelqu'un l'a déjà dit, que nous devons partir sur une mutualisation de nos forces. Si nous avons décidé d'être ensemble, nous devons partir sur une base minimale sur laquelle nous devons travailler. Nous voyons que beaucoup de nos richesses sont emprisonnées dans des conflits et dans des guerres, notamment chez nous, au Mali, en RDC, au Soudan. Et nous devrons d'abord résoudre ce problème-là, parce que c'est fait exprès pour que nous n'exploitons pas suffisamment nos ressources. Et donc, nous devons combattre d'abord le terrorisme, être libres dans notre territoire et exploiter les ressources là où elles se trouvent. Et ça, nous devons le faire ensemble. Si nous allons être chez nous à regarder ceux qui sont en conflit, dire c'est leur affaire, demain, ce sera votre affaire. Donc aujourd'hui, nous devons nous mettre ensemble pour combattre le terrorisme qui est dans tous les pays qui en souffrent aujourd'hui. Et c'est là le début de la libération de l'Afrique, le début de l'exploitation de toutes les ressources que nous avons. Merci.
The next presentation, after education, health, agriculture, and resource management, we are moving straight to the new digital revolution. To do the moderation for us, we have no other person but our own, the Honorable Bishop Emeritus, Dr. Jackson Kosgei. The Honorable Dr. Kosgei is a member of Parliament in the National Assembly of Kenya, a very respected religious leader for over 50 years of spiritual and social transformation. He is also a respected political leader, so he married politics with religion, having served in the various capacities in the government and social organization. He is also known as a defender on matters of Pan-Africanism and family and sovereignty, on Africa cultural values. Shall we give it up for him? Emeritus, you are welcome. We have
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, the sessional leader. You are leading us very well. The honorable speakers and their representatives also, distinguished members of this great delegation, good afternoon. Now, leading in a time when our concentration level is a bit low, we will try with my brother our level best to make it good and exciting for us. I wish not to take my time because our leadership has requested that we limit to 20 minutes. A lot can be said, but I'm very happy to be part of the 4th conference, as we have been from the other conferences before. We are leading into adoption of the charter, and we are talking to the last points that will make this charter realizable, make it workable in terms of saving family and the future of our community. I wish to conclude my remark before I invite my brother by mentioning 3 questions. 1, we are asking ourselves and addressing a very important issue of self-preservation. Some people think we are competing with these other characters with their numerous letters. That's not our business. Our major business is about our self-preservation. Can Africa exist in another 100 years? Can this man and woman still be available in history? That's what we are asking ourselves. Is what we are engaging in preserving or destroying our people? And whether we have the will and the choice to preserve the future of our people. So we are asking, is every measure that we are taking as governments and societies are geared towards preserving our people? So sometimes when we hear people arguing, they think we are competing with LGBTQ or any other crazy definitions. We are asking ourselves. Then the second question is that the global north have practiced this over the last 65 years and trying to make it a reality. We are asking ourselves, what is the impact on their society? Is it giving them a future of hope or a dark future? So that we should ask ourselves as a continent and developing countries of the world, whether we should go to that direction. And finally, we are asking ourselves the question. We are witnessing a decline of population in certain parts of the world and are seeing a surge and continued progressive growth of populations in the world. The question is, I am a social scientist, why you discover that societies that are pro-family are growing and societies that are promoting individualism and these other freedoms are declining. So something is wrong and we cannot follow anything that comes. So as we discuss and as we bring this conference towards what we would call a resolution, maybe in some few, by tomorrow or the day after, we must be looking at the takeaways that is possible to use it as a statement to influence our public and our leadership in our various countries to make this a priority. We need to protect our people and nations, and we should not follow any other program blindly without looking and asking ourselves the right question. With that, ladies and gentlemen, because we don't have time, may I invite my colleague in this to take us through, and then a few questions before we break for lunch. I think those are good questions as we go for lunch today. Karibu ndugu.
Thank you very much, and a very good afternoon to all of you excellencies and honorable members of parliament. It's a pleasure to join you here, and let me once again take the opportunity to say thank you to my very good friend, the Honorable Susan Opendi and the Honorable Ashems Songwe, who I would say that between the three of us had a conversation about 5 years ago about a family values conference. And I'm happy that from that conversation between three minds across the continent, Malawi, Uganda, and Ghana, today the whole of Africa, we're holding our fourth conference here in I've been asked to speak on data protection and safeguarding cultural heritage in the context of technology, artificial intelligence, and digital governance in Africa. And we've got I double as the Minister for Communication, Digital Technology and Innovations here in Ghana. I'm just going to try and run through this, but the African family today is a proud institution that is under unprecedented digital assault. And why do I say we are under unprecedented digital assault? The average daily screen time for the African youth is 7 hours. Now, consider that you spend 8 hours sleeping, you're supposed to spend 8 hours working, and you're supposed to have 8 hours for other activities. 7 hours for every African young person is spent on a screen. 62% of African youths, or teens actually, so that's between the age of 13 and 19, are exposed to pornography online even before they turn 15 years. The rise in cyberbullying across sub-Saharan Africa is 3 times the number. We're seeing a rise in young people committing suicides. People, because of the way the African context is, are not tracing the story behind this increasing number of suicides among young people, but cyberbullying is a big one. At the Cybersecurity Authority, which is one of the agencies I oversee, we're dealing with an increased number of cyberbullying cases. 78% of African children's content come from foreign platforms. So your kids, your grandkids are spending time, and 78% of the content that they listen to is from a foreign platform. 1 in 3 African parents are reporting that their children have gone wayward. They've lost the African value of respect for parents, and that's coming from online platforms. And you just need to take your time and listen to what our kids are watching and your grandchildren are watching online, and you'll be shocked at what they are being told is a new norm for dealing with parents. And there's 40% drop time, or drop in family meal time, which is correlated with smartphone use. Now you see families, even when we get the opportunity to sit down to eat, we don't have conversations as Africans. Growing up, meal time was family time. It was a time for us to talk. Our parents got to know what was going on with us. We got advice from our parents. Today, the parent is eating, but he's responding to emails. The child is eating, is watching an online video. 40% in the quality of time that we've spent. The problem gets even deeper. The digital platforms that your kids are listening to are built in a particular manner. It's not by happenstance that what is happening is happening. It's well orchestrated engineering. There's algorithmic parenting. And what that does is the platforms are giving recommendations on a daily basis to deliver content to African children that the parents never see, the parents never approve, and often contradict what our household values are, because the algorithms are not trained on African values. There's a deliberate value injection. Today, they have gender deconstruction, they have hyper-individualism and anti-family narratives online for our kids. And this is not accidental, it is intentional. And what they do is they're using this to dilute the Africanness of our homes and the next generation of Africans. The algorithms are bypassing the elder as well. Today, it is, for millennia, the African identity has been a respect for the elderly and our communal living. Today, the new generation of Africans have no respect for the elderly, and family councils and elders and community ceremonies are now a thing of folklore and a distant past. It's no longer what we do today. Digital platforms have inserted themselves as the primary socialization background for a whole generation. The algorithms are addictive by architecture. Ask yourself why a simple song addicts children in Eswatini, in Malawi, in Ghana. Baby shark do 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 do, baby shark do 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 do, baby shark. And you see that children, irrespective of what their mother tongue is, are addicted to that song. That is social engineering. That's the power of artificial intelligence. The brains of kids, babies, were studied to understand the sound that their brains react to, and that was used to develop the melody behind that song. And that's the amount of money and investment that's going into changing the mindset of our children. It's addictive by architecture. Children want a tablet. A child will take a tablet instead of a plate of food today, simply because of how addictive. The brain that is being formed is being addicted to the rush that they get from the platforms. And that's the generation of Africans that we're building. Community fragmentation is happening at scale. Today, we all have thousands, tens of thousands of followers. Over 300,000 followers. Truth is, I barely know even 100 of them in person. But that's the community that we're all building. We're building huge communities of following online, but in reality, when was the last time you picked a vehicle, drove to your friend's house, and sat with them to have a face-to-face conversation? We're losing that identity which makes us African. The whole essence of Ubuntu, that I am because you are, no longer exists. It's replaced by how much click I can get and how much likes I can get. The AI systems that are shaping Africa's youth are a foreign language. And that, to me, is one of the biggest problems that we have. What AI does to the African child, it recommends foreign-produced content that normalizes alien values to African families. And so the values that are being taught to our children are alien to us as Africans, and that's what artificial intelligence does. The content moderation that many of these AI tools have will flag our African outfit. I'm dressed in a traditional Ghanaian smock. The AI algorithms will flag this as not meeting community standards. Our Eswatini brothers are dressed in traditional Eswatini outfit. African beauty, it will be flagged as indecent exposure. Meanwhile, that same AI tool will not flag a white lady in a bikini as flouting communal standards, because our African values have not been put in the AI tools and into the AI moderation models. This is what we're dealing with. The AI tutoring platforms exclude our history, our culture, our values, and our epistemologies. The things that make us African, whether you're from the north, the south, the east, or the west of Africa, the uniqueness of our Africanness is excluded from the algorithm biases that we face today. And that's the world that the young Africans are living in. Beauty and social validation. The AI trains African girls to reject natural appearances And so you'll see all the apps, they all have filters. And what do those filters do? They take away your natural face and give you artificially made up European looking faces. So our African women think that African beauty is not the same. Meanwhile, I always say, you can bleach black and make it look white, but you can never color white and make it black. Black does not break. And the AI chatbots will answer children's questions about identity, about sex and religion without the African context. And so they will teach our children that it is okay to have two mothers or two fathers, but that is not African. That is not who we are. But that's what the AI chatbots are teaching our children. And our children, many parents do not know, your children and grandchildren are on gaming platforms like Roblox, where pedophiles are allowed to open accounts and pose as children, and a lot of sexual online grooming is happening. And I'm not speaking about this just from an African context. It's happening in Europe. It's happening in the US, where pedophiles are being arrested for having groomed 16, 14, 13-year-old kids on these children gaming platforms. But the gaming platforms are not putting in place the security measures to protect our children. And it's happening here in Africa, but because we don't have the right reporting mechanisms, nobody is flagging this. And so when you look at this, in this room, what languages are we interpreting in? What languages are present here? English, French, Arabic, Portuguese, Spanish. None of this is an African language, but this is a meeting of African members of parliament. It tells you part of the foundational challenge. And so AI does it. 92% of the data that the tools are trained in is in English, 4% in French. African languages make up only 2%. And so tell me how we're going to be able to translate our future to our young people. Now, the problem here is AI is driven by data. Artificial intelligence is only as good as the data that it generates. 80% of African personalized data is processed outside the continent. And that's why, as Minister for Communication, we've given an instruction that every data that is hosted or that involves Ghanaian national data must be hosted locally, and we've put a ban and a stop to hosting of our national data in data centers outside of our country. We will host our own data in our own country. The estimated value of African data that is being mined externally is $40 billion a year. $40 billion. That's the value of data that's being generated every year. How much of that comes as royalties from big tech? 0%. Not one peso comes back to us. 5 of the top tech companies, American companies, process African data. And just 2 weeks ago, Donald Trump signed an executive instrument, an executive order, mandating that all new AI applications must be submitted 30 days before they go public to the US government. Ask yourself, why is the US government interested in the AI solutions and tools that are coming to the African continent? Ask yourself, and I see my executive director for the Data Protection Commission is in the room here. I refer to him a memo that had been, or an agreement that had been sent to the government of Ghana by the US government on health data. Sadly, some African countries had already signed. When that came up at cabinet, I said to the cabinet, I said, that is not a health agreement, it's a data agreement. And we did a report in 24 hours and submitted to the president, and I'm proud that our president, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, wrote to the US government and said, take your money, Ghana will keep our data. We will not sign that agreement. Because a US mandated health agreement that asked us to submit Ghanaian health data to US government for the next 30 years gave us no control over our own citizens' health data, and said that any dispute we had will be settled by US law and not Ghanaian law. Tell me why they need that data. Very simple. US health tech companies are producing medication that is not working for the African continent. And they need your health data to be able to design the medication that they will sell to you and make profit. And that's why they offered 100 million, 200 million to all African states to hand over our African data. Members of Parliament here, if your governments have not signed yet, lead the opposition to that. African data must remain African. There are 5 concrete threats that I'll highlight here. Child sexualization, anti-family ideological capture. I could take my time and go into all of this, but we don't have a lot of time, so I'll just quickly run through them. Intergenerational knowledge rupture, cultural shame and identity erasure, and digital addiction that is destroying family time. Honorable members, your excellencies, it's important that we understand the danger that we face with pornography. And I keep saying that, look, we don't need to rewrite the script. Today in the United Kingdom, for you to access a pornographic website, you need to put your driver's license for them to be able to determine that you are 18 years. Ask yourself why they are doing that. Because they've seen the danger and the damage that pornography and over-sexualization have done to a generation of young UK citizens. And that's why for us, we believe that in Ghana here, and we're working with going to cabinet on that, to make sure that before you access any X-rated site, you must put either your driver's license or your national ID card, so that we know who you are and who is going to that site, to prevent children from being exposed to such content. This is the real threat. Because when a child is over-sexualized at an early age, it affects their development, it affects their thinking, it affects even their morality and their values and their standards. And the only way to break a people is to go after the children. Because when the children are destroyed and damaged, that culture, that culturalization gets damaged. The fight against Africa is not against those of us sitting in this room. We were a lost case. The fight is against our children. And that's why when myself and my colleagues in Ghana introduced the Family Values Bill, one of our key arguments has been that we're fighting for the innocence of Ghanaian children, because our children must be protected and safe. We were protected by our parents in an African family setting. We must do the same for our children and grandchildren. I'll quickly jump to the governance void. And in the governance void, what we see is that who makes the rules? The platforms that your kids are on, that our children, the young people of our countries are on, who makes the rules? Facebook sits in California and determines what is called community standards. Whose community? Does the Facebook community standards set in California understand what the people of Ningo and Pram call community? Or do they know what is community in Hashem's constituency in Malawi? Or in Sarah Opendi's constituency in Uganda? Did they consult you to understand what the community standards of Africa are? No. They set those community standards. And the things that are values to us are excluded by that standard. And the things that our community standards truly abhor are allowed for our children. YouTube's content policies determine which African cultural videos are demonetized. You hear about our young people and our young content creators. One of the biggest challenges I have as minister is that my young creators say, Sam, get us monetization. We want to make money from the content that we put up. The whole concept of monetization is about control, economic control. If our young content creators know that a certain kind of video will get them more money from the platform, they will push that kind of video. What kinds of videos get the most money? Videos that show disrespect for the elderly, videos that are anti our African values. Meanwhile, videos that educate and videos that promote African values get less monetization on these platforms. So it's a systemic thing that you put up, you're a content creator and you put videos that build an African identity, you don't get money for those videos. You put up content that is anti-African values, you get money for those videos. And that's the incentive behind the monetization. And that's why as a continent, as one country, we can't fight this. Ghana alone cannot fight this. Nigeria alone cannot fight this. We must become united at the AU level to say this is our position and bring them down there. And let me tell you, honorables, we underestimate the amount of power that we have. By 2030, 1 in every 3 human beings is going to be African. The AI data sets need our data. And so we must bring them to the table at our own terms. The world's richest man, Elon Musk, is afraid to travel to Brussels. Why? Because the EU will arrest him if he sets foot in the EU. The EU is about 460 million people. That's just like West Africa. Nigeria alone makes up almost that number. Africa is 1.5 billion people. Apple is one of the biggest technological companies in the world. The EU, a coalition of 450 million people said, we're not happy that you have a different type of charger, so change your charger. And Apple had to listen to the EU. Now, Apple is going to begin to make new phones that allow you to take out the battery. Why? Because the EU said so. That's the power of collectivity, the power of unity. If 450 million people in the European Union can do that, imagine what 1.5 billion of us in the African Union, if we make our voice one, can do as a continent. We will shape these platforms, but they divide us, and we allow ourselves to be divided. Until we unite, we cannot fight this battle. TikTok's algorithm is shaped by US-China wars. Nobody's talking to the African Union. Meanwhile, their biggest users are on our continent. Only 33 of our 54 member states have data protection laws. Honorable members, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Ghana has a law, Nigeria has a law, Malawi has a law. Just pick that law and also replicate same. Because we have the Malabo Convention. We are more alike than we think we are. Who is enforcing all of this? African parliaments, and that's the heading I put there. I said African parliaments have ceded our legislative chambers to Silicon Valley. Let us reclaim our position as legislators. We make the laws. We determine what our people must do. Let us not cede our power to Silicon Valley. What can we do? Ghana has already, I'm using Ghana because I serve as Minister for Ghana in that capacity when it comes to digital technology. In 2012, we passed the Data Protection Act, as far back as 2012. And as we speak now, we're reviewing that law. In 2020, we passed the Cybersecurity Act. As we speak, we're reviewing it again. Because in 2012, when we passed our data protection law, there was nothing like artificial intelligence or artificial general intelligence. So we're bringing it up to speed to meet the realities of today. In 2023, we passed an online safety policy to protect our children. In 2024, we passed the Family Values Bill. It wasn't accented to. We brought it back again. We passed it last Friday, and we'll keep pushing until the president accents to it. And just in April this year, we did it in 2025, but we launched the National AI Policy in 2026. And what we've done with our AI policy is to mandate that our AI policy must respond to Ghana's own indigenous needs. And so we're not going to import AI wholesale. It must sit within our national plan. The 3 pillars of action for Africa's Parliament, and I've taken my time to break this down. I'll share the slides as well. But 1, digital family protection. We must make sure that appropriate design codes for all platforms 7 minors. We can pass the legislation, and they will have to mandate with it if we do this as the African Union. We also need to make sure that platform liability for child harm and harmful content exposure. Today, you know that we don't take our time to read the terms and conditions, but the terms and conditions state they have what they call safe harbor provision. We must mandate AI impact assessments for education and public services. Here in Ghana, we're doing that. Right now, I have an AI focal person in every one of our 23 government ministries who reports to my ministry, and we're making sure that every AI deployment across all of government runs through our ministry to be sure that the quality and the standards that we've set are maintained. Yes, I'm getting pushback from the tech society. I have Ghanaian techs who are fighting me. But I know that behind that sits the big tech that is not happy about what we're doing. But look, we will not have a digital Wild West in Ghana, and we must not have a digital Wild West in Africa. That space must be regulated, and will be regulated in a way that does not stifle innovation, but in a way that protects our African identity and the innocence of our children.
I think it's wonderful. We give him a few minutes to conclude, right? More? Right, so, bash.
I'm running through because I know the time is...
Right.
Moderator, I'll wrap up in 2 minutes. We must publicly fund digital oral translations and traditions and indigenous knowledge. We're building, and President Mahama announced a $250 million National AI Compute Center. I took that memo to cabinet with one vision. Ghana cannot continue to build AI innovation on the back of Western models. We want to own our own models and build our own models. And the good thing is we're not doing this just for Ghana. We're doing this for Africa. We're building an AI compute center that will serve the entire African continent. And so working with our universities, we're building national language models. We're building in 7 key Ghanaian languages. And then we're also building in African languages. We're building in Creole, we're building in Swahili, we're building in Hausa, in Yoruba, because we want to be able to share what we build from Ghana with the rest of Africa, because we must own our own compute infrastructure. The first phase is $250 million. We're trying to push it. We're going to build what we call the national language model, the Ghana charts, that will be able to, because we spoke about Agric, we spoke about all the other things. Today, we want to give solutions to our farmers, where you don't need an Agric extension officer to go and check what is wrong with the plant. You can use your mobile phone to scan the plant. But the question is, many of our farmers do not speak the languages in which these applications are in. So how do we put those solutions? And that's why, for me, a language like Dagbani, or a language like Bono or Chi, or Nzima, which deal with our key farming areas, we're building national language models in that, so that when a farmer who is farming cashew in our Bono region, which is where we farm a lot of our cashew, takes that application, he can speak in Bono to the application. And the model, AI model we have built in conjunction with our universities, will be able to interface with whatever platform it is, get the solution, and give him back a response in his mother tongue. That is what technology must do for us. And so I urge you to all adapt this. We must fund this, and we're doing this with our academia. So your universities are critical in doing this. So we're having KNUST, University of Ghana, University of Cape Coast, work extensively with the traditional authorities. Because you see, when you take the traditional language, and for those of the Ghanaians, if you take the word nu, which is written NU with an inflection in my mother tongue of Ghana, depending on how you say it, the meanings are different. When you say nu, it is man. When you say nu, it is drink. Nu is water. So the same NU, depending on the inflections that are put on it, could mean multiple things. And that's why we must work with traditional authority to explain and own this. Data sovereignty and cross-border data flows, very important for me. We must make sure that our data is stored locally. Many of us are adopting all kinds of AI systems and fingerprint systems, and our national databases are sitting on servers in Northern Ireland and in the Middle East. That must end. African data must sit on the African continent. There is a reason why the US does not allow any US citizen data to even be hosted in Europe. And now the EU has also passed a new resolution from this year restricting the hosting of any European data outside of the EU. Because data centers have now become a critical thing. At the ITU meeting in Geneva in May, I moved a resolution which we are going to take to PP, which will be sponsored by Ghana, to exclude data centers from during periods of warfare, like the way hospitals and schools are. Because today those data centers are the ones that power your hospitals and your schools. And we saw from the US-Iran war, data centers sitting in Bahrain were attacked. There's a reason why data centers are being attacked. Imagine if your national immigration database is sitting in a foreign jurisdiction and that database, that data center gets attacked. What happens to your national sovereignty? But even as we talk about national sovereignty, we must be able to agree on what cross-border data we want to flow, especially as we push the African Free Continental Trade Area. So we would strike a fine balance between allowing seamless flow of data, but also holding what is critical for our national sovereignty. And I think that what we must do is to ratify the Malabo Convention without delay in the countries that don't have it. And we should have a pan-African digital governance body with treaty-level authority. I think that that's very critical for all of us. These are the details of the three different pillars I spoke about. I'll skip that. A compact for African family digital sovereignty, a call to like-minded legislators. This is where I think we must go. We must pass a Digital Family Protection Act in your parliament. So these are the 5 things I want every MP in this room to take back home. A Digital Family Protection Act must be passed in our various countries. We must establish parliamentary AI. We must establish a parliamentary AI. I'll just go back to my, maybe the AI is not happy with the things I'm saying. We must establish a parliamentary AI and digital oversight committee with family protection in their mandates. We must have those committees in parliament. We must ratify the Malabo Convention and enact domestic data sovereignty legislation in countries that have not done that yet. 4th, we must refuse trade agreements that compromise African digital sovereignty and data rights. We must refuse such agreements in our parliaments. It makes no sense for anybody to be offering you support for agricultural help and adding sexual and reproductive health rights as part of the terms and conditions of something in agriculture or trade. What is the correlation? We must scrutinize this very well. And let us be clear, there are people who walk in the corridors of African governments, power of African governments, who are compromised and who will smuggle this in. But we stand as gatekeepers in parliament to ensure that we protect the African value. And the 5th thing is that we must co-sponsor an African Inter-Parliamentary Digital Family Protection Declaration. And that's what the African Charter that I hope we pull out of Accra from this summit will do. That when we finish with that charter, we lay it before the African Union. And I hope we lay it before the African Union before the end of this year. So that by February next year, when President Mahama becomes the next AU chairperson, he has something on his table that he has to push as an African Family Values Charter on the African continent. What Ghana is offering, because yes, we're saying do this, but we've already taken steps as Ghana. We can share the Family Values Bill as a model legislative template. We provide Ghana's Data Protection Act as a drafting resource, and that's something I'm available to give you our existing legislation and even our current draft that is going to Cabinet, which has been updated to deal with AI and all of those. We'll continue the Pan-African Parliamentary Forum on Digital Family Protection. This must not end. Sarah and Hashem's, this must continue. We must lead the drafting of an African Inter-Parliamentary Digital Family Compact, and then we must advocate jointly, not just at this platform, at the UN-IGF, at the ITU, and Ghana is hosting the Africa IGF this year. We're hosting here in September. I'm going to make sure that African family values is part of the conversation at the African Internet Governance Forum. And so, a covenant with African prosperity. These are my closing thoughts. The children of Africa did not ask to be born into a digital age. They did not choose the algorithms that shaped their worldview, the platforms that colonize their attention, or the foreign ideologies that are being pushed into their homes. That choice belongs to us, the legislators, who are their parents, their grandparents, their uncles and their aunties. We owe that to our children because our parents did that for us. We cannot be the generation of legislators and parents who failed the African continent. Every parliament that passes the Digital Family Protection Act, every legislature that ratifies the Malabo Convention, and every lawmaker who stands up to Silicon Valley and says, not in our homes, you will be fulfilling the oldest covenant in African governance, that obligation that we have to protect the next generation. That is who we are. I thank you very much.
Wow. 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 Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Wow, that was the best choice to end this morning session as we enter into the afternoon, right? I think we will, most of it is factual presentation, right? It's based on research, based on governance, and we want to thank you for being with us. May I, with the permission of the leadership of this conference and being sensitive with the whole long day you've had, can we have 3 questions and then we can close the session? Because I think it was so straight that really it is food for thought for every country. Can we take one on this side? Let me give that lady. Then in the middle.
Now pick to me, eh?
I give that lady 2. And then finally, it's difficult to choose. Let me give the gentleman there. We'll see whether we can have another round. But I think that's a good presentation. We'll look at it later. Can we have the 3 questions given? And make it short, right? Go straight to the point.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the very insightful presentation. My name is Awatif, and I am from the Republic of Chad. As we discuss artificial intelligence, digital governance, and family values, I believe that we must also look beyond today's challenges and anticipate the technology that may shape our societies tomorrow. Emerging reproductive technologies, including artificial wombs and AI-assisted reproductive systems, have the potential to transform not only healthcare, but also our understanding of motherhood, family relationship, and the transmission of values from one generation to the next. In Africa, motherhood is not only a simple biological process, it is a social, cultural, and moral institution that play a central role in family cohesion and social and child development. If technologies eventually make it possible to separate pregnancy from human mother, this could raise profound ethical, legal, and cultural questions for our societies. So my question is, should Africa wait until these technologies become widespread before it can define its position? Or should we establish ethical framework that sets clear limits and principles for technologies capable of shaping motherhood, family, and upbringing of our future generations?
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, you also say that only 33 countries out of 54 has data protection laws. As these data protection laws are local or cross boundaries.
Thank you
And for
very
us
much.
as officials,
Yeah.
for us as officials, in terms of data protection, what platform do you prefer or more safe to use for us, like Facebook or TikTok or X? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The lady in the middle. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Honorable Sam George, for the wonderful presentation. You have actually made my day. I wanted to raise two issues. One, of course, you've raised the negative part of the emerging technologies like AI, and